I think anybody who tells you that you can optimize for mental health with thinking skills is fucking batshit crazy and should be locked up. Physiology has a massive, massive impact on your psychology. Any psychologist who just thinks that we can solve mental health just with thinking skills needs to go back to school.
Most advice about stress starts in the mind. Think differently, reframe it, get tougher. But stress is a physiological occurrence, and it often shows up in the body first. And if you miss that, you can miss the point entirely. Paul Taylor has spent his career inside high-pressure environments, the military, elite performance, and a PhD dedicated to how humans respond to stress. Paul built his reputation around pushing hard and digging deep, until his body forced the conversation to change. At 53, he was preparing for open heart surgery. A moment where mindset wasn't enough, where physiology wasn't optional, and where survival demanded a deeper understanding of how the body and the brain work together in unison.
It's not macho. When you hear hardiness, people think it's that sort of David Goggins type thing, right? Hardiness is a set of cognitive or psychological orientations that we bring to the table when faced with challenge and adversity.
You might never face open heart surgery, but you will face moments that your thinking skills can't solve on their own, because performance isn't just psychological, resilience isn't just mental, and stress doesn't care how positive you think. This is Performance Intelligence, the show that unlocks potential for everyday life. Is there a moment in your life where hardiness wasn't optional, it was essential?
Yeah, I reckon that was probably 11 months ago. Well, it started a little bit before that, probably a year and a half ago. I went to a mate of mine who I play soccer with, who happens to be a cardiologist. And I said to him, hey, mate, I'm now in my 50s. I want to get a full checkup of my heart. What we call in the UK an MOT for your car, which is, you go in and do all the checks on an old car. Because I said, I'm not interested in cholesterol. I think it's bullshit. I want to know how my heart is functioning. So he said, look, come in and we'll look at different things. We'll look at your rooms, your plumbing, and your electrics, right? That's the analogy for how the heart operates. So did all these tests and then came back to him for the debrief. And he said, look, the good news is you're fit as a fiddle. The bad news is you were born with a dodgy aortic valve and you need to have open heart surgery. So that was a bit of a surprise, to say the least.
50, I've got to pull you up. You're a fresh, vibrant, jacked-looking 50. Young 50s,
54.
Mate.
54.
54. So those watching on YouTube, you'll see the shiny head. He's a brother from another mother. So,
indeed.
And I've known you for years. We operate in similar circles. We present similar yet nuanced different messages. So we're very supportive and aligned with our messages. I can only imagine the jolt you got as the fit bloke on stage, running your podcast, engaging other people, changing the world, to be then told you're having open heart surgery in your early 50s. Fuck me.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So it was a bit of a shock. And there was part of it like, fucking hell, open heart surgery. People who get open heart surgery are really unhealthy people, particularly in their 50s. But, I was born with a dodgy valve. Actually, interesting little aside, after I had my open heart surgery, about a month later, I saw an article from Roger Black. Do you remember Roger Black?
Yeah, the Great Olympian.
Great Britain, 800 meters, I think. I think it was an 800, maybe doubled in 1500. He then had the exact same thing. He had a bicuspid aortic valve, but he knew about it from the age of 11 because it's often genetic. All right. And he knew from the age of 11, and they said, look, it's a watch and wait thing until your regurgitation gets pretty severe. So just a little bit of the anatomy, most people have a tricuspid aortic valve. That means it's got 3 leaves. It's a one-way valve. Your left ventricle pumps the blood out. The valve opens. All the blood goes through your aorta and goes to the rest of your body, and then it shuts while your heart refills. So me and Roger were born with 2 leaves, just a deformity. And then what happens is over time, those 2 leaves don't shut properly. So you start to get regurgitation. Ross had, my cardiologist said, look, your regurgitation at the minute is moderate to severe. We tend to wait until it's severe before we operate. So you probably got a couple of years. And I said, why do you wait? If it's moderate to severe, why wouldn't I do something now? And he said, well, typically you wait because it's a risky operation. So we tend to wait until it's severe. And I thought, that's not the way that I think. I thought, being ex-military, you go into battle when you're at your strongest and your opponent's at your weakest. So why would I wait for my heart to get even weaker before I operate it? But I remember, walking in there thinking I'm getting a big tick, clean out bill of health, and walking out of there knowing I needed open heart surgery. And I remember as I walked out, the words of Seneca, the Stoic philosopher, hit me like a slap in the face. I pity the man who has not faced adversity because he's not faced a worthy opponent. And nobody, not even him, knows what he is capable of. So as I was walking to my car, I went, right, this is my worthy opponent. This is what I've trained for all my life. So straight away, I just went into challenge orientation.
So that was transition from being told you're having the operation to the car. Automatically, you kicked in Seneca quote, this is my challenge. I'm going to grow from this stress, this challenge, and bounce back rather than being consumed and shrink by it.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's not normal, Paul Taylor.
Well, I think we're a product of our environment, and because I read a lot about Stoic philosophy, right? And that, Marcus Aurelius, it's not what happens, but how you react that matters. But also I had been doing my PhD and focusing a lot on hardiness. So I knew all about this challenge orientation. So I think it was a subconscious thing, but also I think, it's my military background. It's the sporting background as well, with a lot of people who are of that bent automatically just shift into challenge mode.
So you'd been doing reps and sets for 52 years of your life. So when the cardiologist says, all right, we're going to put you under, because the risk of open heart surgery, there is a big risk. And I want to talk to you about this. The big risk is you're married happily, 2 gorgeous kids. The big risk is you don't come back.
Yeah, exactly. And that is interesting. And we can talk about that in a little bit. But I remember driving home, and as you can imagine, there's lots of things going through my head at the time. And then I just remembered a conversation I had with a mate of mine, Reg, who was a retired Lieutenant Colonel, Australian SAS. So Reg was the commanding officer of the Australian SAS at the time of the first Gulf War in Kuwait. And he led the SAS into battle that night. And I remember having lunch with Reg. And I'd said to him, because I spent 8 years in the British military, but I never went to war. And I was pretty curious. And I said to Reg, do you remember, mate, how did it feel that night going into battle? And he said it was really interesting. He says, obviously there was a bit of anxiety and stress because we were going to war. But he said the overwhelming feeling was a perverse sense of excitement, because this is what we had trained for all of our lives, and we were getting to test ourselves. And as I was driving home, I thought, right, I'm borrowing that attitude, because I know from all the research that we get to choose how we respond. I mean, Viktor Frankl talked about that. The Stoics talked about that. So as I was driving home, I said, this is what I've trained for. This is my worthy opponent. And this is what all my military training, my combat survival training was to toughen me up, to prepare me to face my worthy opponent. All my CrossFit sessions, my ice bath sessions, and I get to choose the arena, and I get to choose the time. And I have 6 months to optimize myself.
There could be some people watching or listening to this saying, this guy is like a caricature of the Bourne Identity. This is Matt Damon incarnate. And I get it, knowing you. There will be some people that'll go, fuck, like, I don't have any of that training. I don't have any of that resilience or hardiness to draw upon. Surely it's not that easy.
we get to choose how we respond. We all get to choose how we respond. And, I've spent so much talking about this in my talks. This is almost a beautiful moment, right? It's like, fucking hell, are you going to walk the talk now? Or is this just all talk, right? So this is a big challenge that's put in front of me. And I thought, you know what? I'm actually going to embrace this challenge. And I started to get a little bit excited about it, about my worthy opponent, just like, any athlete starts to get excited about a grand final or a boxing match or a world title or stuff like that. It's like, fucking, this is what it's all about, right? Because we do get to choose our attitude. And I think that's probably the big take home for people, is that we get to choose how we respond to our circumstances, right? And yes, training helps. And we'll talk about that, I think, because I think it's, I talk about hardiness like a muscle, the challenge muscle, the control muscle, and particularly the challenge muscle is that you develop it just like you develop your muscles. So that if you are in the gym, you are growing your muscles, you're challenging them, they are growing. But if you don't get in the gym, they atrophy. Everybody knows that, right? And I think it's the same with that challenge orientation. So I think I'm pretty fortunate in terms of the life that I had, but everybody still gets to choose how they respond. That's the choice.
Did you have any moments where you said to a good mate, where maybe you said to your wife, this is harder than I thought, I'm struggling right now?
I don't think I did. You know what I did do? So I obviously went back and I thought, if you're going into a contest like this, you need to know your opponent, right? So I did all the research. I looked at, because my cardiologist had talked to me about different options. So I looked at the different options, which were mechanical valve replacement, which involved obviously putting a mechanical valve in, which ticks for the rest of your life, and then you're on warfarin for the rest of your life. And I thought, I don't like that. And then he said, well, you can also do a donor replacement, or this new thing called the Ross procedure, where they cut your pulmonary valve out and they use that in your aorta, and then they stick a donor in your pulmonary valve. Reason being, your pulmonary valve doesn't do much work, right? And I thought, well, I think that's the one I want to go for. So I researched that, looked at all the outcomes, and then I thought, well, the big thing I've got to do is a risk assessment here. And particularly with my ex-military bent, flying in helicopters, we always did risk assessments. So I looked up, what's the death rates in open heart surgery? And they were less than 1%. And I thought, well, those odds are pretty reasonable. And I backed myself, I'm pretty fit. I'm reasonably young for getting this. So I thought the risks are okay. And I don't think, I'd have to ask my wife about this, but I don't think there was a moment along this where I thought this is harder or that I had any doubt. But I actually forced myself to confront my own mortality as a part of this, to actually go, let's just run a scenario that the less than 1% comes true. What would this mean? Would you be content with your life? And I think that's a really good exercise to do.
So did you sit down and actually map out what happens if I don't come back? What happens with wills? And did you record anything, write anything?
Yeah, well, that was the big thing, was for me, was about the wills and was about my kids. That was the one thing. I mean, I reflected back on my life.
Makes it real, doesn't it? You're doing that.
It does make it real. And I think it was a brilliant exercise to do. And I forced myself to do it. And I would do it on my morning walks. And I need to credit my wife, Carly, for this. I've long take my two dogs out for walks in the morning as close to sunrise as possible. And I used to be listen to podcasts there. And she said to me, why don't you use this as an opportunity for mindfulness? And I thought, actually, that's a good idea. So I just went out and, looked at the changing colors in the sky, looked at my dogs being so happy, listening to kookaburras, which is a little moment of ikigai for me, and really starting to see her life to go, you might have 6 months left, right? And really force myself into that. It was probably one of the best things I've ever done. And then reflecting back on my life, and I actually landed at a point where I went, you know what? If my time is up, I'm actually pretty content. I'd be the one regret that I would have is that I don't get to see my kids grow up and flourish. Right, that was my one major thing. But I thought for the rest of it, I'm 54, I've gone young, but fucking hell, I've had a great innings. I've had some amazing experiences. But then going, right, if I do get another chance, how do I change things? I think that was a really useful little process. And I think that it made me much more mindful. It also made me slow down. I had some business opportunities that I could do. And I thought, you know what? Life isn't just about business and success in business. I don't want to be one of those people where it's business, and you put living on hold until your retirement.
Ooh, I could give you some examples of that.
Oh, yeah. Me and you could speak all day long about that, right?
Can I put you on the spot? This wasn't in our script or running order. Can you do a coaching session with me on hardiness?
Yeah, sure.
I mentioned to you before we came on air, at time of recording, I have been in a sling for a month. Distal bicep tendon repair. What that means is through wear and tear and thinking I was 30 in an older body, ripped the bicep tendon off the bone, so I had to have a reattachment. My learning on this is muscle to muscle, bone to bone, heals pretty quick. A month into it, still sore. I tripped over the dog about 2.5 weeks after the surgery, stumbled, put my arm up. People on YouTube will see that, so thank God it was in a sling, and just could feel this pain in my bicep. Had to go back, get another MRI. The physio thought you've probably torn the tendon up the top. Spent 3 days waiting, thinking, oh, fuck, I thought of you after a day because I was having a pity party thinking, oh, God, it's close to Christmas. I've already been 2.5 now, 3 weeks. I need another operation like a freaking hole in the head. And I literally did. I spent a day, and I'm sure lots of our audience resonates with this. When you get told you're going to have an operation or there's a change in work or change in living, we don't automatically go to Seneca. So I love your story, but for a lot of people, they'll just go down. And I found myself doing that. And then I just had to pull up and go, all right, I've got my head around it. If I'm going to have another operation in 6 months, 12 months, this will be part of my stupid fucking story, tripping over the dog 2.5 weeks into rehab. How would you coach me? So I don't need the operation, but I've still got a pretty long road. It's going to be 6 months until I'm back. Lost a lot of muscle. Coach me, wise one. What should I be focusing on? What should I be doing?
So I would be encouraging you to focus on what handle you're going to pick this situation up with.
I've only got one handle, mate. Didn't you hear me?
Epictetus. So Epictetus says that everything has 2 handles, right? And we get to choose what handle we pick it up with. So in situations like yours and mine, one handle is the pity handle, the victim handle. Woe is me, this has happened to me, all of this negative consequences. Or the other handle we can pick it up with is, so what am I going to do with this situation? How am I? And Epictetus is, again, to quote him, he says, we are all actors in a play. And sometimes we get a part that is not of our choosing, but our role is to play our given roles well. So my question to you is, how do you play your given role as well as possible? How do you be authentic in what you do and look at this through the lens of how am I going to use this? This is your worthy opponent right now. So what are you going to do about it? You've got this worthy opponent right in front of you. Are you going to shy away from it? Are you going to play the victim? Or are you going to use it as an opportunity to test and develop your own character? That would certainly be my starting point.
I'll give you 2 thoughts. One little game I've been playing, because I'm right-hand dominant, so everything I'm doing left hand. Clipping the hair, shaving.
Fucking what an opportunity for you to do some brain neuroplasticity, right?
Do you realise, because I think sometimes as speakers, it can sometimes sound kitsch, brush your teeth with the opposite hand,
It's fucking hard, isn't it?
Well, when you don't have a chance and your breath smells, you're hairy, your receding hairline's looking like a tennis ball, you got to do it. So like now I'm clipping, shaving, brushing. Now after a month, really good. But here's the one big challenge I've had in the corporate world, because life goes on. I was in KPMG 10 days ago. just after the second little trip, and I was delivering one of our leadership capacity programs. I practiced so freaking hard that week on a whiteboard with my left hand. And at Seagulls yesterday, I did a session with our coaches on our mental skills, our big philosophy shift this year, and just drew it, the 3 points and a little picture, because I like to do a little picture with it. And I look back, and if I do say so myself, that looks fucking good. So my left hand now on a whiteboard is at the stage where I've had people in both those audiences saying, hey, are you left-handed? It's like, no. But here's the learning. And you don't get this in textbook stuff that you and I do with our study or in academic work. When you learn a new skill, not just a pretend skill, but really learning a new skill, this was like learning a language, totally rewiring. I was so freaking tired. And even to write and type, you're using so much energy. So here's the learning. One is we save so much energy and we're so much more efficient when you develop good performance habits. You and I teach that. 2, when you really learn a new skill, because you're bloody tired. And at the end of those days, I was saying to Tony, I feel so tired. Now, the last week, I don't feel anywhere near as tired. So here's my little play moving forward, Epictetus. I'm going to continue to draw with my left hand when I'm doing workshops and not drop it.
Yeah,
now,
that's cool.
I don't know what that's going to do for me long term from brain function, but I've done a month training. Why not keep it going?
And that's the other thing is the silver lining, is that we can choose to focus on the negative, or we can choose to focus on the silver lining. This is a lot of the work of James Gross, and that reappraisal of actually looking at negative events and saying, yeah, that was shit, or the situation I'm in is shit. And you can focus on that, or you can focus on the silver lining. What's the silver lining? So the silver lining here is all the shit that's going on in your motor cortex, that development of your brain, the neuroplasticity, that's a huge benefit for your brain, to keep your brain young. And so, again, it's choosing where you focus your energy and your attitude and your thoughts, I think, is really key. And for me, this comes into attentional control, which is the most important thing, I believe, when it comes to performance, when it comes to mental health, is what we do with our attention and how rigorous we are with our attention. And I was involved in a Delphi study, which is an expert consensus study. It's around a military project on cognitive fitness. There were 64 of us experts, including our mate Harps. We were 2 PhD students.
You and I, we can't do a topic without talking about the Godfather, can we? We'll make sure.
Right, exactly.
Even if he just listens to this piece. G'day, Harps. Yeah, we love you.
Yeah, indeed. And so both of me and him got in with these 62 other proper experts around the world, and we were all asked to rate the cognitive drivers of performance under pressure. And every single one of the 64 experts, whether it was military psychology, business psychology, or sports psychology, or neuroscientists, every single one rated attentional control as the most important cognitive driver of performance under pressure. And I actually think attentional control is the most important factor in mental health.
Totally,
because we get to choose where we place our attention. And in Japanese psychology, they say that the most important thing in our lives is what they call the flashlight of your attention. And that for a lot of people who have mental health issues, whether it's depression or anxiety, their issue is not that there are struggles in their life. It's that for a lot of those people, they shine the flashlight of their attention in their own heads for long periods of time, struggling with their thoughts, their emotions, their situations, wanting to change the past in their head, wanting to predict the future, wanting to change other people's behavior, wanting the universe to bend around them. And that's just wasted attention. And from a neuroscience perspective, attention governs everything in the brain. So we need to be very vigorous about that flashlight of our attention. That was another silver lining that came for me out of this whole open heart surgery process, was actually becoming a bit more rigorous about the flashlight of our attention.
So talk to me about the science, because Hardiness showed up for you and you'd done the training. I struggled a bit more than you, but I think it then kicked in naturally. You've given a good script now for me and others going through this. But let's zoom out. Let's look at the research, because it can be quite motivational. Dave Goggins, pain is just weakness leaving your body. Side camera angle. When I was in the Delta, I love parts of Goggins, but I think parts of it is just, come on, that's not normal stuff. What is the science actually telling us that hardiness is?
Yeah, so first of all, it's not macho. When you hear hardiness, people think it's that sort of David Goggins type thing, right? But it's not macho. Hardiness is a set of cognitive or psychological orientations that we bring to the table when faced with challenge and adversity. So it was first uncovered, if you like, two psychologists, Salvador Madi and Suzanne Kosaba, back in their work with the Bell Telephone Company in the 1970s, I think, and it was a multi-year intervention that they were doing, that there was a massive corporate restructure, that business was struggling, and they noticed that a whole bunch of employees suffered burnout and stress-induced illness, but about 30% of them actually thrived in the pressure cooker of stress. And they identified that they shared three different psychological orientations: control orientation, challenge orientation, and commitment orientation, which we can unpack a little bit later. But to focus on the research then, there was a bucket load of it done in the military, particularly the US military. They found when they screened military recruits who were about to go through basic training, they did a whole heap of psychometric assessments on them at the start. And then at the end of it, they saw who passed and who failed, and looked back at the start and said, did anything at the start predict who passed and who failed? And hardiness was the one thing that shone through. Hardiness then was shown to predict who passes and who fails Special Forces selection training, the toughest physical and mental course you could possibly imagine. And that's across different militaries. It also predicts who passes and who fails police special operations training. Hardiness predicts career tenure in high pressure environments such as the military, police, first responders, and school kids. There's a lot of research of hardiness in academia. Kids who are higher in hardiness are much more likely to go to and finish university than their low hardy peers, independent of their socioeconomic status. We also know that high hardy people have better overall well-being. Their immune systems, this is crucial, respond better to stress than low hardy people. They recover quicker from serious illness, and they've got a better cardiovascular health. And so there are innumerable benefits in terms of high pressure occupations, but also overall health. And that's because of the psychological orientations for dealing with stress, because we know that stress is the major driver of a whole host of chronic diseases that are implicated with high levels of cortisol over time, whether it's physical or mental. So you can kind of see how all of this works. And
can kind of see you're a little bit excited about this, or I may have a little bit of a pun and say Dr. Taylor is hard on the concept of hardiness.
Indeed. And it's because, when with my PhD, when I was doing my literature review, looking at resilience, it's interesting when you dig into the literature, right? There is a lot of debate about resilience. There's no general consensus about it. There's argument about whether it's a state, a trait, a process, or an outcome. Is it something that I'm born with, something I have, something I do, or is it an outcome? Now, most academics would say it's more of an outcome, resilience, but it does not tell you how to get there. Hardiness also, does.
You could have 5 meetings. I could have 5 meetings with 5 different companies, and they all want resilience. And the obvious question, so what does that look like? Or what is the outcome?
Yeah, what does that mean? Yeah.
There's physical resilience, there's psychological resilience, there's a environmental or an organizational resilience. I find it so hard to explain when I'm asked what is resilience. There's the ability to bounce back. I just sometimes feel that's a bit kitsch or clap your hands. So I struggle with resilience and where it really sits. You would be the same. You get booked and briefed to do a talk on resilience. I've always struggled. How do you measure it, first of all? So how do you change it if you don't even know how to properly measure it or define it?
Yeah. And interestingly, when you look at the studies of interventions, so particularly there was a big chunk of mine looking at military research, and heaps of resilience programs were rolled out. So the US, what do they call it? Soldier Fitness Program was a big resilience program rolled out by Martin Seligman and his team across the US military with no evidence that it would work. It was based on what they did with school kids, and actually was pretty ineffective. And same in UK resilience programs have been ineffective with the UK military as well. So you get little pockets where there's success, but on the whole, the training programs are not really that effective. Whereas hardiness interventions are really effective, right? This is the thing. Or hardiness traits predict better work performance, better work behaviors, better work attitudes, and also better well-being outcomes for the individual, right? So this is why I'm so passionate about hardiness, because number one, it's clearly defined. It's forwards looking rather than backwards looking. Resilience classically is about bouncing back. Hardiness has been called the courage to grow from stress. I'm much more interested in that than just bouncing back from stress, right? And the interventions are more successful. And I showed in my PhD you can learn hardiness.
And you've doubled down, right? In researching for this today, you've changed your podcast. It's the Hardiness podcast. A lot of your programs, and you've got a book. I've buried the lead on that, haven't I, ladies and gents? Paul's got a new book out called Hardiness. One of the anchor quotes I love in your book, mate, is comfort doesn't prepare you for the inevitable challenges of life. Hardiness does. And hardiness represents one of the most significant predictors of success, health, and well-being under pressure. Who does not want to have more success? Let's say Western and Eastern definition. Health, well-being, and be able to handle pressure.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why I am so passionate about it. And the other thing I think that fueled that, I mean, I used to talk a lot about resilience. In fact, I did workshops called Beyond Resilience, moving. So for all of my time, I've been thinking there's more than bouncing back. I talked about beyond resilience to a state of stress adaptation, which is essentially what hardiness is becoming stress adapted. But there's just so much meat on the bones with it. And what pissed me off was in COVID, everybody became a bloody resilience expert. I'm sure you've seen this, right? And I think resilience has become the most overused word in the English language and probably other languages since COVID. And I think everybody's over it.
Geez, we've been behaved. It's a good 20, 25 minutes into the podcast and we haven't started dropping real bombs. Do you remember you and I did a podcast? One we did on your previous book, which was about why doing hard things is good for you, right? That we've all become soft. Do you remember the outcry we had on that from some of the academics? Because you and I had the audacity. Do you remember that? We had the audacity to get on a podcast and question some of the teachings coming from some of the great institutions, but research that's not practical sits in archives and gathers dust. So there you go, ladies and gents, the big fella, 20 to 25. You've really grown up, haven't you? You're behaving today.
Indeed, yes. Just got to warm the audience up. But I think the big take home really is that it is a system or a collection of cognitive orientations supported by, and this is what I've added to it, right, in my book and in my PhD research, is physiological hardiness, not just the psychological hardiness. And hey, you want another quote to blow things up? I think anybody who tells you that you can optimize for mental health with thinking skills is fucking batshit crazy and should be locked up, because your physiology has a massive, massive impact on your psychology. And any psychologist who just thinks that we can solve mental health just with thinking skills needs to go back to school. They really do.
And we'll counterbalance, because there's going to be a mutiny at the moment and we'll stir them all up. I can remember my first degree was exercise physiology. So my master's is in coaching psychology. I said this to a mate of mine, Daniel, back when I was 21. He he was going out with a girl, Louise, and she was a psychologist. I actually said to him, quote, what do you talk about? Because we're about the body and getting jacked and exercise and performance, and she's about Freud and cognition of the mind. How indoctrinated was I back then, just thinking physical PTs, exercise physiologists own the body. Some people are feet up, some are head down. Ultimately, we're heart-centered. They're getting a bit deep and you have an aperture, and then you can decide. Because sometimes in moving, you need to get that cascade of 500 chemicals in your body to make you feel better by moving. Other times you do need to think. So this whole notion that you're just one or two is totally foreign. But there would be a lot of people like me back then, mate. This is 30 years ago, thinking, I've studied exercise physiology, that's my default. So I love hearing you've taken a concept, because Bell Property doing this Bell Telecom's doing this in the 1970s. Hello to Bell Property, another client. I surreptitiously gave a plug, then didn't even mean to. But Bell Telecom's doing this. This is not a new concept, but you've then gone, hey, this is not just psychological top-down. Hello, you've added a physical component. Yeah, tell us more about that.
So let me give a little bit of meat on what I just said. So British Medical Journal, 218 studies, systematic review of interventions for depression. The least effective was SSRIs, medication. They compared a whole heap of exercise interventions. Every single one of them was more effective than medication, which is our go-to treatment, right? We also know that people who have anxiety have low discomfort tolerance. They got low distress tolerance. They've also got low discomfort tolerance. They don't like intense exercise. And when you get them to exercise at a more intense level, they start to improve their symptoms, right? The best treatment for anxiety is actually exposure therapy. But we look at things like vitamin D. Vitamin D supplementation is an effective antidepressant. Creatine is an effective antidepressant on its own and doubles the effectiveness of psychotherapy for depression, right? And the list goes on and on. Spending time in nature, all of this stuff. Nutrition. If you have a diet high in ultra-processed foods, you are 53% more likely to have common mental health disorders than people who have a diet low in ultra-processed foods. So, we are an ecosystem. Body and brain are not separate entities. This is what the West has completely fucked up, driven by René Descartes, who said that this whole concept of dualism. And that was because, interesting, if you go and look at the history of that, it was because the Catholic Church persecuted Galileo for suggesting that the earth was not the center of the universe. And then Descartes came up with his theory around this and said, mind and body are separate entities. The mind is the realm of the church and the body is the realm of science. And the Catholic Church went, okay, we can live with that. So at that point in the West, if you were a scientist, you did not talk about the mind, right? And so, but we now know that that's horseshit. Placebo works. The placebo effect is used in clinical trials because of that impact of the mind on the body and vice versa. So we are this entity, this ecosystem. So I think we need to have that approach. So let me just give it a little bit of the physiology. There are a number of hormetic stressors, which are, it is basically exposure. It's summed up by Friedrich Nietzsche. That which does not kill us makes us stronger. And there are over 600 known hormetic stressors in our environment. Exercise is the classic one, right? If you don't exercise at all, it's bad for you. You start exercising, it's good for you. Do more and more, it's better. But then at extreme levels, it starts to become bad for you again, right? There's that drop off, right? But we know that there's nutritional polyphenols that people talk about, antioxidants, sulforaphane, resveratrol, and stuff in green tea and all of this. They're not antioxidants, they're poison. They are small doses of poison that persuade an insect not to eat it. But in us, because we are much bigger, they activate the cell danger response, the antioxidant response pathways, NRF1 pathway, and basically upregulation of protective genes because of exposure to stressors or toxins. So we know that everything from fruit flies to worms to rodents to cats, dogs, primates, there's 1 billion years of evolution right there. All of them respond to the stress of exercise, the stress of heat, and the stress of cold by upregulating stress response proteins in those pathways that I mentioned that make the host more physically resilient or hardy, right? Nature has designed us to become better because of exposure to intermittent stressors, right? This is physiological hardiness, right? And this is why I say we have to integrate the physiology with the psychology. And a lot, I think, we should be looking at mental health with a physiology approach first, rather than people coming in with anxiety, depression, and getting a script for medication that often does not work or is just effective for people with extreme stuff and has so many side effects, it's ridiculous, that aren't disclosed to people. Rather than do that, we should be going, well, what's your exercise like? What's your diet like? What's your sleep like, right?
Do you regularly get out in nature? Do you laugh,
Absolutely.
play, connect with passionate pursuits? Do you have people you can talk to without recrimination and be vulnerable and tell them what's going well, what's not? When I hear you say that, it sounds so freaking obvious, doesn't it? And even just piecing together the timeline. So you're going back to Galileo, and I can't help but think of Queen Galileo.
Yeah, indeed.
But then the godfather of biopsychosocial model, which I know you talk about, George Engel, 1975, that dude was talking about this. 1975, PT, that's 50 years ago. Somehow, the researchers just did not look at the physical. And like you, I'm gobsmacked at times to think it's just been so vacuumed. So what I love is that you've now got evidence, but also practical, and we'll finish today with some of the practical tips for our audience, that you can move and you can fuel and you can play and you connect and you can down-regulate and you can work hard. It's this oscillation, isn't it? And that's a lot of what you say in your book. It's discomfort. And we've grown to think, oh, I don't like that. I just want to be on this thermostatic comfort zone. It's going to freaking kill you. You need stress.
Absolutely. And from the psychology perspective as well, what we have done is that we have medicalized normal human emotions. We have medicalized it, we've pathologized it, and we have created an ever-expanding library of mental health conditions that have these treatments. And actually not one of them, not one of the DSM mental health conditions has a clear, consistent biological signature. Whereas everything or most things in the physical world, physical ailments have a biological signature. You can go to the doctor, he can measure your blood glucose, your HbA1c, and say you have diabetes. He can measure your blood pressure and say you've got hypertension. He can look at your arteries and do all of those things. And cancer, here's the biological signature. There are clear biological signatures where we have this ever-expanding list of mental health conditions that are basically, and I'm being a little bit facetious here, but are made up by very smart people sitting in a room and creating a bunch of different conditions, right? And I'm not saying that they're all bullshit, not at all, but I'm saying the concern for me is that we are medicalizing normal human experience, right? If you have a breakup, you're going to be sad. You don't need a friggin' antidepressant if you've had a breakup. If somebody dies, Jesus Christ, you're going to be sad, right? But that doesn't mean that you need a pill, right? What we used to call worry is now anxiety, and we've got a pill for that, right? And then this ADHD, which is just gone boogaloo. Like, I can tell you right now, I would bet a significant amount of money that a large proportion, not all, because we're talking about a continuum, but there's a large proportion of especially kids who got an ADHD diagnosis, that if we went into those kids and got them to exercise and change their diet and sleep well and have their phones out of the room and have them outside playing, that those behavioral issues or those attention issues would just disappear.
You've just explained my childhood. You've explained your childhood. You've explained childhood of anyone, probably up until when mobile phones became prevalent in the late 90s, early 2000s, and it's just totally changed. So I look at my little girls now. We give them a bit of TV time, but they become monsters. Gorgeous. They're my kids. Freaking love them. Too much TV time. Poor emotional regulation, poor behaviour, yelling, screaming. It overtakes their brains. Hey, you're a little bit passionate about this topic.
Just a touch, as you can tell.
Take a big breath. You've gone a bit red. Is that the lights or is that your blood pressure because you're out there on this crusade? So he gets very passionate.
That's excitement.
Excitement. I love it. It's passion. Now, you can measure it. It's grounded in science. It's trainable, hardiness. So it's a very solid, robust construct compared to some of the other terms like resilience. So the obvious question next, or the cluster of questions, is how do you train hardiness? So we've had our examples of hardiness. Love how you just dialed it. That was a really good example, mate, just upon reflection even further. From the medical clinic to the car park, bang, it clicked in. So it shows, even in that example, you can front load a lot of these skills, these responses, these mindsets in the reps and sets you do day in, day out. So I think that's a really good segue into what can people train to become more hardy. So then when life inevitably hits you in the face, which it's going to at times, you are ready.
So let's start, and there's no particular order in these things, right? But I'll take commitment orientation first. So people high in hardiness commitment believe that life has meaning and purpose, and they are highly engaged in life's activities, and they're engaged in work, they're engaged in their social lives, they're engaged in their spare time, right? You will know these people because they bring energy to work, they're curious about things, they have hobbies. And then you have low hardy people who are just a bit blah. You know, they're a bit grey and they're just, everything's freaking hard and they create problems, not solutions. But I am concerned there's an increasing amount of our population who are spending an increasing amount of their spare time within the confines of four walls with their heads buried in a goddamn screen. And these are what I call passive consumers of life. They are wanting to be entertained constantly, and they are looking at other people's lives typically, right? So what we can do around commitment orientation is, first of all, get clear on your purpose and your values. I think this is absolutely foundational to hardiness, right? What is my purpose and meaning in life? And Viktor Frankl and most psychologists will tell you, life has no meaning other than what you give it. So we've got to actually do the work here, right? I'm a big fan of getting people to write down a tombstone statement, which is a statement that would be written on your tombstone that would sum up your contribution to society, right? My one is military man turned educator to help others become better versions of themselves. But it's just about, and I'll paraphrase Seneca, who says, every individual bears the responsibility to be of value to humanity, right? If possible, a large number, if not a smaller group. And if that's too big, your immediate community. So how can you leave a positive mark for you existing in this world, right? I think that's really critical. And then getting clear on your values, like what is important to you in life, your character traits, how do you want to live? How do you want to be remembered? I think that is absolutely critical. And that's a huge part of commitment orientation. And then getting fully engaged in life, getting yourself hobbies, what the Japanese call ikigai. Those little things that you do where you get lost in them, right? And this can be knitting, woodwork, growing vegetables, whatever. There's a million different things, but it's just get off your fucking arse and get out of the screen and get into life, right? So that would be commitment orientation. Control orientation, there's two elements to this. One is a deep belief that you control or heavily influence your environment and your destiny, right? It's what we call in psychology an internal locus of control. People with an external locus of control, low hardy control people, you will hear say, this shit always happens to me. I'm an unlucky person. My life was sorted and COVID ruined it, right? So they're externalizing their destiny. High-hardy people know that the universe is going to give them shit sandwiches to deal with, but they are but have this complete belief that they can still influence their environment and their destiny, right? And it's all Epictetus, play your given roles well. And a little exercise that people can do, and I recommend they do it very, very often, is you take a problem that you're wrestling with, you draw the page in two. On the left-hand side, you write down all the things that are within your control or your will or your power, as Epictetus tells us. And the right-hand side, you write down everything that's not in your control or your will or your power. And then you do an audit, and you go, where's my energy? And a lot of people spend a lot of time on the right-hand side of the page. And as the Stoics tell us, we must focus on that which we can control and refuse to invest our energy in the stuff we can't control.
And just on that, just for people listening, watching, it can sound simplistic, but when people like Paul and I do this in our coaching, whether that's one-on-one or a small group workshop or even a large workshop, when you get people out of their head, it's ruminating. Think of a plane at an airport and the runway gets up closed here often in Sydney with the winds. So we're down to one runway. So every other plane is waiting to get mission controlled to land the plane. Your thoughts will ruminate for decades unless you work out a way to metaphorically land the plane. So that simple act of writing down and, we say in coaching psychology, stacking the seesaw. What are all the positives for changing? What are all the negatives in not changing? And then just balancing that out. Gosh, that can help get out of your head, can't it? And I know it sounds so simple, but I just wanted to get the audience to really think. One of the number one ways to get out of your head is to write, whether it's journaling, whether it's doing an activity, stacking the seesaw. Get out of your head.
Yeah, absolutely. And to go back to my original story at the start, when I drove home from my appointment with my cardiologist, knowing that I needed open heart surgery, I put it in my driveway. I went into my house. I didn't even tell my wife yet. I went into my bathroom and I wrote in big letters on my bathroom mirror, "Worthy opponent." And I wrote a training program right there, right then. And I was like, I'm going to focus on what I can control. What I can control is how I go into surgery, right? My rehab starts now, my prehab, right? So I need to train to face this worthy opponent. And actually, I'll tell a funny story. I don't think I've ever told anybody this, and I probably shouldn't tell this, but anyway.
Were you wearing pants?
No.
Keep going.
Right. I was in ICU, and I just came to, right? And my wife and son were there. My daughter was off in Asia, but I kind of came to, and I said to my wife, I got to get out of bed. I got to get out of bed. And she's like, you're freaking out. And I'm all wired up. And she's like, you can't get out of bed. And I started to get out of bed. I said, I need to get out of bed. And she's like, right, okay, well, look, I need to try and help you. And I got out of bed and I did 10 squats. And I was still a bit off my face, but I'm like, my rehab starts now.
You've just come out of having open heart surgery. You've just woken up, and the first thing you did is drop down and do 10 squats.
Yeah. And they were pretty shitty squats because my little guy started videoing me, and I've got the video and I'm blabbering because I'm still kind of off my face a little bit. But I had it must have just been in my head. My rehab starts as soon as I wake up. Now, I'm not suggesting that people should do that, but it's just I had this thing of focusing on what I can control, and it's my rehab. And for me, rehab started the minute that I woke up, right? So maybe I'm a bit mad, but...
No, because we talk about, or you often hear about muscle memory. It's actually not, it's nervous system memory. So you had done that much training from the diagnosis home before you even spoke to Carly. My worthy opponent, you'd done the training program. You are just front loading that, hey, I'm taking this on. So it doesn't surprise me. It makes me laugh. Thank you for sharing it. But it doesn't surprise me at all because you woke up and what have you done? I start now.
Yeah, absolutely. That was it. My rehab starts now, and I'm going to rehab this quicker than anybody, right? That's the challenge orientation. I was like, this is my worthy opponent. Like what Epictetus says, the Olympic Games of life are upon us. There is not a moment to waste. He should probably have put a brackets, but maybe not in ICU.
I love that quote, Paul, and you've given us some invaluable information in this podcast. But to wrap up today, I'm going to give you the flip. Is there a question and anticipation for our conversation today that I haven't asked you, that if I don't ask you, you're going to be in bed tonight going, that other shiny-headed guy should have asked me this? Or the flip, is there a question you would like to ask me?
What I would like to ask you, I'm going to flip, because I think we've covered pretty much the major ground. I would like to ask you, given that we have this conversation, how are you going to use this to adapt what you do or think about moving forward in your rehab?
I'm going to use it on 2 levels of being greedy. So how am I going to use it moving forward in my rehab? I've already tapped into it, if I'm honest.
Or not just your rehab, your current situation, right?
Yeah. So I've already tapped into it, and I needed to because I was starting to have a pity party. I let myself go for a day. I don't know whether sometimes I like doing these subversive experiments to just actually let myself run a little bit and feel the pain, feel it, and then pull it out. Do you do that? I think it's weird when you get a bit of an understanding and skills in that connection biopsychosocial model. Thank you, George Angel. I do sometimes play a little experiment and then go, right, okay, enough. This will become part of my day-to-day habits if I don't pull out. But what am I going to do? Answer the question. I'm going to do a journal entry and look at what are the clarity in the learning on this, which came out when I was talking to you, those 3 areas. But I'm going to think about what else, and I'm going to think about how else can I build hardiness, or that construct of hardiness, into what I'm doing. As I said, we are very similar in many ways. I don't think, though, I'd be walking from heart clinic to the car and kick in as much. So it shows that training, that level. You've gone a whole different level to me. So I'm going to double down on this. But first of all, I'll get clarity on those 3 areas. Second one, we're putting together a program. Do you know Jackie Lauder? She's made of harp. So Jack's the performance psychologist with Collingwood. She's also working with Melbourne Storm. Rockstar, working in the sport field. Clinical psych has really made that transition to practical skills in the high performance, cutthroat, ruthless world of sport. And Jack and I are putting together a program on mental agility. And I really want to think about how do we build hardiness. And I'll acknowledge the source and what you've done and give you due reference. But I love that link between the physical and the psychological and training it. So I feel from today, you've inspired me, Paul. You've stimulated me to look at how can I build in some of the great work you've done, referencing the source into our programs. Because I think that's a real gift you've given today, is to get that link between physical and psychology. But the work you've done, what's a PhD? 5 years. Become an overnight success. Yeah, I think there's some real work, some real work we can do to help translate to our audience what hardiness is rather than resilience.
Anybody who spreads the message, I'm all over it like a spider monkey.
And I'll come back and say, hey, this is what we would like to teach and promote and mention you in the program. But yeah, you've got some seeds you've planted that I need to water. I always look forward to our conversations. I never know exactly what we're going to get. Life is like a box of chocolates.
Box of chocolates.
I love seeing the evolution of you since I've known you for 10, 15 years. You're owning this. You're on brand. You're on message. You're really passionate, and it's taken to that next level. So thank you. Thank you for your body of work, and thank you for translating that authentically to a wider audience, including ours.
Cool. And thank you for having me on. It's been awesome.
We'll do it again soon.
Cool.